Hi, everybody. Welcome. I have a really special guest today. Her name is Madeline. She's a former member of the LDS Mormon Church. She actually has her own YouTube channel where she has done in depth research into mind control programming within the church. And so she's going to tell us about that and tie it in with, at some point. But first, we need to learn about it. And then we'll look at how that applies with what's occurring right now with these crimes and with Emma and anything that comes up. So, welcome, Madeline.
Thanks for
Would you like to introduce yourself and let people know the name of your channel and things like that? So if they want more depth, and we'll repeat that again towards the end, but if they want more in-depth information on the mind control programming inside the Mormon Church.
Sure. My channel is Galactic Storyteller. It is an older channel. I put out a lot of information several years ago, breaking down the esoteric rituals or ordinances, as the church calls them. So I break those down to their esoteric meanings, which means it's from Mormonism comes from Freemasonry, which has its roots in magic. So I break down the rituals or the Mormon ordinances from their esoteric perspective, which is their true meaning, not the outward meaning that the typical member experiences. There's a hidden meaning underneath. So I break down what that means. I took a break for several years, probably 4 years. And then I did a series of interviews with individuals who were from either within the Mormon church or they had experience with the Mormon church, as well as MK Ultra mind control programming, which is a CIA based operation after World War II. So the Mormon church is knee deep in mind control programming. And so the experiencers that I interview, they talk about their affiliations, the rituals they attended, who the attendees were within the Mormon church, including prophets, general authorities, local bishops, stake presidents, and so forth, as well as the overlay within the government program. So it's very intricate. It's an ancestral relationship between the CIA as well as the Mormon Church, Catholicism, and Disney.
Okay, so at some point, all these people intersect and work together to develop mind control programs, you're saying?
The CIA developed the mind control programming after World War II. Do you want me to just launch into
Oh,
that?
yeah. Just tell us everything. I'll let you go on for however long it takes, 15 minutes, half an hour. Just explain everything about what you know about this subject.
Okay. After World War II, what happened was Russia had gone into Europe to Germany to take a bunch of their scientists, the German scientists. They wanted to get a leg up on whatever these German scientists knew. So, of course, the United States had to be in competition with that. When they entered Germany, they took approximately 1,900 scientists, professors, and so forth, brought them over here to the United States under what's called Project Paperclip. And so these scientists were embedded within NASA. The United States was using them as well as putting them in the universities. And they developed what was called MK Ultra trauma based mind control. And so the whole purpose behind Project Paperclip was to create the perfect Manchurian candidate, meaning you could have a soldier who would go do whatever their assignment was. And if they were captured, they would not be able to withstand torture, or they would be able to withstand torture and never give up the information. And the only way they could do that was to fragment the mind and hide the information in different areas within the person's personality. So, through trauma based mind control, what they would do is they would torture these individuals, unspeakable torture, including sexual torture. So much so that the person would disassociate. They would create different personalities. And within these personalities, you had to have certain codes, phrases, colors, numbers, audio cues or triggers in order to access that particular portion of the personality, where
Mm-hmm.
each personality would have a different purpose in order to either withstand torture, uh, have information hidden within there, and you had the keys to unlock that information. So you could torture a person all day long, just really torture them sexually, physically, and you would never get that information out of that individual if
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have the keys to unlock that particular portion of the personality.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh, total sense. Yeah, go on. Yeah. Total sense. So they would show them a trigger like Alice in Wonderland Rabbit, and that would
Yeah.
unlock that information. But if someone didn't have that, if they didn't have the key, they would never be able to get to it no matter what.
No. Mm-mm. That information was safe. So then that information could be brought back to the United States, and then the person with the keys to unlocking their personality would be able to then get the government information or whatever spy information that they were looking for.
Hmm.
So the program became extremely twisted, and a lot of these individuals were used as sex kittens, honeypots, in order to go in and entice different government or high officials, and they would compromise these individuals
Hmm.
so that they could blackmail them later. But they oftentimes use sex or pedophilia, those
Hmm.
types of things, information you would not want released to the public. So now you're willing to be compliant to whoever has this information over you.
Right. And so the CIA was doing this program, and then at some point they hooked up with leadership of the Mormon Church to get subjects to practice on, or what
Well,
happened?
yes and no. The Mormon Church has always been a major contributor within the CIA and FBI programs. So because
Oh,
these young men go to the MTC, the Missionary Training Centers, and they learn multiple languages. And now this applies to women as well, but the bulk of their agents have come from the males within the Mormon church because they speak multiple languages. Plus, we're taught from the very beginning to be obedient to authority.
right,
So you've got multiple issues going on within the individual. We have to be obedient to authority within the church, to the government, to the state, and then now you add MK Ultra into the mix, and you have a perfect individual who is willing to do whatever because you bypass the conscious mind. There is
right.
there's a suppression of the conscious mind, and so you're not thinking about right and wrong. You're obedient to
Oh
whatever you
yeah, you
feel.
just do it. No conscious rationalizations even come into play at all, right?
Right. Right.
And
So
when you watched all these crimes going on, do you think Lori may have been a MK Ultra?
I am highly suspicious. Very, very suspicious for a number of reasons. First of all, Disney is a major programming center as well as the Mormon Church. And so a lot of the individuals that I work with, survivors of MK Ultra, they have been programmed on Disney property. Below, there's a tunnel system in Disney, and
A
you go
temple
down
system?
a tunnel system
Oh,
below.
tunnel system. A tunnel
Mhm.
system. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and many of the survivors I work with have been taken below Disney for programming, for pornography reasons. They film child pornography below Disney. And
Wow.
Lori and her family, they have talked many times about always going to Disney, and that's not proof of anything. I want to make sure I'm very clear about that. It's just another piece that makes me suspicious, mixed in with her behavior, as well as a number of the comments that she has made.
Right. So do you have any examples that come to your mind right now, or just in general?
Just in general, we haven't heard a lot from Lori.
Mm-hmm.
What we do hear of is hearsay through individuals that have been with her and Chad. And so I'm not sure how much that is worth. I look at Lori's mom and
Uh-huh.
I see sex kitten programming, as well as I see that with Lori. There are a number of indications that would lead me to believe that quite possibly Lori has been through a number of different mind altering programs that have been trauma based and sexual based. She's really hypersexualized.
Totally. Yeah. She seems to flip right into that sexually promiscuous kind of movements and personality and things like that.
And the overdone makeup is another clue that I look at her and her mom, and I've had questions about this right from the beginning as to whether or not they have been subjected to this. We know that Lori's dad has, I believe, schizophrenia.
Correct.
Okay.
According to Melanie Pulowski's biological father, in court records, he said that Lori's father is a diagnosed schizophrenic. And
Okay.
then her sister had it for sure, to the point where, all the mental illness ended up killing her. Stacy, Lori's sister, Stacy.
So I wonder if it's really schizophrenia or if it's a break from reality due to generational um, SA, SRA abuse. I don't know what I'm allowed to say
Uh huh.
on the channel. So I would be very suspicious of that. Sometimes the mental health industry, um, they are either there to anchor in existing programming if the therapist is working as a handler, or they
Mm-hmm.
just may not be aware of mind control at all. So you either have compliance as a handler or ignorance.
Right, right. Yeah, and you know what? I've actually talked to a few SRA victims too. And does that mean satanic ritual abuse?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, so yeah, I've talked to several of them. In fact, this last week I did a reading for someone and she didn't tell me anything and I'm saying all these things and just my mind was blown. And she said that a psychologist that she had went to this psychologist to try to have deprogramming, but it turned out he actually worked for them.
Yes. Yes.
And that wasn't the first time I had heard that. Several years ago, I had done a similar reading for some other people, but the woman had ended up, they had hunted her down and killed her when she tried to leave. And so I did a reading bringing her through, but the people that were there said the same exact thing happened. It's like people that pretend to care around them will say, you should see this therapist. But it turns out this therapist is really part of the programming.
Yes. Yes, I think the mental health industry has been infiltrated because these individuals try to seek help and they jump from one therapist to another because they can't get any help. They recognize that at some point one of the alters within the individual will actually cue off the core personality to say, I have suspicions about this therapist, or this therapist is a handler. And so the client gets skittish and runs. So they go for long periods of time without getting the mental help that they actually really need, but there's nowhere to turn because either the therapist is a handler or they're in complete ignorance about what's actually happening to the individual.
Yeah, and that would seem like super specialized if you were really going to help someone, because a regular therapist would have no idea how to help someone who, in for intents and purposes, has a multiple personality.
That's
Right.
exactly what it is. It's dissociative identity disorder. I'm not sure why they have changed the name of it, but from the mental health perspective, they don't necessarily legitimize DID disorder. It
Hmm.
exists, but they say it's extremely rare. I happen to think that if you are like a personality that's able to disassociate, and the government will do tests on little children, especially if you're from a bloodline family, to see which children will disassociate and which won't. I have families that I've worked with where 50% of the children are able to disassociate and 50% aren't. So those two children will go into the program and will be tortured and used for whatever reason, while these two other children won't have any idea what's going on.
Oh, okay. So they test the children to
They
see
do.
if they're susceptible to this kind of programming and before
Yes.
they recruit them in. It's not just any kid.
No.
And
No.
do you have any idea what characteristics make them more susceptible?
It's a generational thing. That's why they use the symbol of monarch butterflies. When you
Uh,
see a monarch butterfly in marketing, that is a sign that this person has been through monarch programming, which is a specific type of programming within MK Ultra. There are all kinds of sub programs that happen. So they will go through the generational bloodlines because with each generation, that disassociation carries on through the bloodline and makes it easier for the children to split personality.
okay.
So now you're getting into bloodlines. And
Uh-huh.
Mormon church actually is headed through the Merovingian bloodline, which is said to be the 13th of the top bloodlines uh,
Really?
on the planet. The Mormon church carries the Merovingian bloodline, which comes through Egypt. And this is said to be Christ or Jesus's bloodline.
Wow. Wow. So they're an actual that's why they're so obsessed with DNA ancestry things,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
they're looking for the ones that are able to be programmed and carry out whatever the Mormon church wants them to carry out.
Yes. Now, different bloodlines will carry different spiritual gifts within the bloodlines. That's why Native
Oh.
Americans are um, they're a very spiritually natured people. We know this. They're very close to Mother Earth. They are tied with their ancestors. I have an individual that I've worked with on and off for years. She has a Native American bloodline, and she was within the Mormon system and programmed very early on because the spiritual gifts that they were looking for. Plus, they used her sexually. They shave their heads when they're little, especially because then the little kid outwardly could pass as boy or girl
Mhm.
before any sort of genitalia and sexual organs developed. So the shaving of the head visually gives the impression of a male or a female. So
Mhm.
there's a sexual reason for that, but there's also the bloodline tie that carries different spiritual gifts that they're looking for. But all bloodlines are used sexually to harvest energy.
Wow. So they do rituals on them within the temples or
Oh, yes. Yes. All the temples have altar rooms that regular members go to for their different ordinances that they go through, such as getting sealed in the temple for
Mhm.
the new and everlasting covenant, is what it's called. But there are altars down below each temple where they have their satanic rituals. And these are areas that the average Mormon member, they don't have access to and they don't even know it exists.
Right, so that's under the church?
It's usually under at the bottom of each temple.
Yeah, so almost every temple has these special
Mhm.
rooms?
I would
And yeah,
imagine.
one thing Eric Smith, Chad's friend, told me was that if you're Mormon, you don't know what's at the next level. You only know it till they introduce it to you. It's not that you go in there and you can read everything and learn as much as you want. It's a level oriented thing and it's a need to know. It's you don't know until you get there.
And this is part of the Mormons have a saying, line upon line, precept upon precept. And so this is the same idea that they have in Freemasonry, that once you get to a certain area of like knowledge
Mhm.
and you're able to process that and handle that, then they give you more. And as you accept that, then they give you more. And they groom and they lead you down the line until you can't cut yourself loose.
And that's even for the ones that aren't being programmed. It's just the
Yeah.
way. Is that what you're saying? So they have it set up that you learn more. And what do you mean they can't cut you loose or something? Can you explain more what you're talking about?
It makes it very difficult to leave once they anchor you in with all of their rituals and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got what's called soft programming that the average Mormon member goes through. This is their regular church indoctrination, years and years of singing their songs, paying your tithing, investing your time in your spirit. And then you've got the programming, the deprogramming part for individuals that are part of the satanic rituals. And so what happens is no matter where you are on this spectrum, the more you participate in these ordinances or these rituals, the more you're spiritually and energetically invested. So, in other words, like my two siblings,
Mm-hmm.
they never went through the temple. They
Okay.
never had their endowments taken out. They didn't get sealed in the temple. It was very easy for them to cut themselves off and to disassociate themselves from the church.
Because they
And
stayed in the outer ring, right?
they
The
did.
outer ring of the good living, nice people or whatever.
Yes, and when they matured, because we grew up in it, when they matured and became 19, 20, so forth, they made different choices. I, on the other hand, met my return missionary husband. At the time, we're divorced now. So, in order for us to get married, I had to go through certain rituals or ordinances in order to be married. So I ended up taking the blood oath in the temple where my siblings didn't. And
Mm-hmm.
so the further I got into it, the harder it was for me to cut myself loose eventually in my mid 30s.
So what was the blood
Rest.
ritual? What was the blood ritual?
The blood ritual, now, a lot of Mormons will tell you this is nonsense because the ordinance has been changed. Up until 1990, everybody before 1990 took a blood ritual in the temple, and it's the same blood oath that the Freemasons take. And what happens is you are naked and you put on what's called a shield. I called it a poncho because I grew up in Arizona.
You
But
called
you're
it
not
what?
a
What'd you call
poncho.
a poncho? So
Yeah.
you're naked, but they have kind of a cloth, cut a sheet out or something and put a cloth over you.
It's like a poncho that you put the hole over your head. And so it comes over just like a poncho would over your front and over your back. It's totally open on the sides. And
Uh huh.
so you're stuck in this little room, and this older lady is there, and she's standing in front of the door, and she's taking olive oil and she's using it to bless my head and bless my forehead. She's sticking her hand underneath the shield and she's putting the oil and doing her consecrated blessing on my navel and different parts of my body. So she's touching my naked body.
Uh huh.
And nobody prepares you for
Oh, they
this.
don't tell you ahead of time that that's what they're gonna do.
You're caught off guard. You've never been prepared for this. And so you're scared. You
Yeah.
don't know what to do. I was a very, very young 19-year-old girl.
And you're
And
alone in the room with this person, and it's the church that you've been taught to never question.
exactly. And as part of this blessing that she's giving, she is saying that, and you have to mimic her words and her actions, that if you divulge what's going on in the temple, you will allow for your neck to be split, and you have to make the motions of being disemboweled, your from hip to hip, and that your guts being removed.
Disemboweled. And what would to them what would the significance of being because Tylee was disemboweled. I saw that. And what would be the significance in disemboweling?
Well, this is actually an ancient practice. The Catholics used to use this back in the Reformation and so forth. The Masons make this exact same vow, and so the significance is if you tell what's going on, we will kill you, and you promise. that we can shed your blood if you tell our secret. And
And so
so
when, oh, go ahead, go ahead, go
and
ahead.
so this is a fear tactic
Hmm.
in order to keep people quiet about what's actually happening. They tell you it's sacred, not secret. And that's how they hide what they're doing. But what they will do is there are times throughout history where they have actually done this openly
Hmm.
and not just to dilate.
So when, what do you mean they've done it openly?
There have been times when other rogue LDS members
Hmm.
have taken upon this blood oath to exercise it as well. This is something that was really instituted at the time with Brigham Young. If you were not towing the line, you would be disemboweled or killed, and he had the body carried out in the open street for other members to see. So this is the only way also that your sins can be forgiven you is by the spilling of the blood. So if you cross the line, the only way you can be redeemed is to have your blood shed. So
So
that's the
is
only way
do you
that
think there's
can
a
be
do you think
redeemed.
there's a chance? Sorry to interrupt. Do you think there's a chance that Lori thought she was just sending her kids to heaven?
Yes.
Yeah, I got that feeling too. It was like no big deal at all. She's sending them to heaven or whatever.
That's
And
what she
actually,
thinks.
maybe in her mind, even doing them a favor because they would never receive the challenges, as an adult where you're choosing good and bad every day. And do you know what I mean? That
Yeah,
just send these kids to heaven. Let's move on with it kind of attitude.
I think she thinks she was really freeing them from any sort of possession. There
Uh
may
huh.
be part of her personality. I'm going off the assumption that she's likely split personality.
Mm-hmm.
So I am thinking that there is a good part of her, or at least several personalities that have contributed to this ideology, that she was setting Tylee free. And the only way to do that was to spill her blood, because then that remission of sin carries on past this temporal world. And now she's free in the afterlife.
That's how it felt to me. Was there was no concern at all about what she was doing whatsoever, as
Mm-mm.
far as killing them, and I kind of thought that she believed that if you murder someone, so that's part of that blood atonement thing, right?
Yeah.
If somebody's murdered, they just automatically go to heaven.
Their sins are forgiving them, and then whatever happens on the other side, at least they stand a chance.
Yeah. So
So
maybe that. Do you think maybe that's what Chad is thinking when he's sitting there with all this evidence when it's likely to end in a death penalty? Because if the state kills him, his sins will be forgiven.
it depends on if they shed his blood. I mean, Utah has now reinstituted the firing squad. He's in Idaho. And so I don't know. I think Chad is a different beast.
Yeah. What do you think about Chad as far as related to the Mormon church and how deep he's might be into these satanic ritual practices?
I don't know about Chad as far as any involvement with satanic practices within the church. I think he just may have a different psychopathy, that he is extremely insecure. I think he probably is very twisted in a sociopathic type of way, which is something he was probably born with. And I think he has taken different readings, that he has come across different theories like the emotion code. He's taken different aspects of the Mormon church, like light and dark. And in order to create a sense of self importance, which I think he struggles with, he's created a leadership type of role for himself with 6 followers.
Uh huh. And so this whole light and dark thing, how does this play out in the Mormon church? This light and dark, what's the deal with that?
Um, they do
Because
not have a rating system.
it's a what?
They do not have a rating system, but
Okay.
yeah, light and dark has always been part of the scriptures, but for the most part, it has been centralized to skin tone. In the scriptures, they talk about light and delightsome people, which
Mm-hmm.
would be white people. And then you have the curse of darkness, through Cain. This would be your Lamanite people, or what the Mormons consider people with melanated skin. So the church has had racist roots right from the beginning. So you have that element of light and dark, but you also have dark spirits in terms of somebody whose countenance doesn't shine. So
Right.
if you've got a light countenance, your spirit is of God. And so
Right.
they do talk about that, that there is no rating system. That's something that Chad has developed all on his own.
Okay. Okay. So that is it's a twisting. Okay. So
Yeah.
in the March reading with Joe Ryan, if anyone's looking at my readings, in the March reading, what I was getting was a twisting of the doctrine.
Hmm.
So they weren't saying like he's following the doctrine exactly, he's doing these Mormon rituals. I never said that in the readings. I said that what they were showing me was a twisting. So he
Yes,
based his stuff on that, but it wasn't exactly that.
that's exactly right. It is a
Yeah.
twist of the doctrine. And so he's kind of put almost a fundamentalist spin on it, as well as a new age twist.
So then what about Emma? Like, okay, look how Emma talks on the stand, real just monotone, emotionless, robotic. What's that about?
She's a, oh my gosh, she's very attitudey, but she has a flat affect. I think she's lying her butt off.
Yeah.
She's lying
Yeah.
her butt off, and she has got unwavering obedience to her father, and that is very suspicious.
Now, is that something that's trained in the Mormon church to have unwavering allegiance to your own father as well as the church? Or is that just there's something about Emma and her dad that is like that?
I
Is
would say
that so?
both.
What?
I would say both, because the father is the head of the household. He's the patriarch. He's got the priesthood. And so he is responsible or has stewardship over the entire family. And so she has probably been reared in a way where dad has all the information and knowledge, and she is required to listen to him. I don't know what else has happened within her childhood to make her so blind to different facts that would say that her dad is actually guilty of murder, and she's so willing to dismiss it all. So I'm not sure what that level of obedience is about.
Yeah, so I had earlier talked to a neighbor of Chad Daybell's, and he said, and she said, even prior to the remains being discovered, that Emma Daybell was just like her father. That she would follow him around at church. It was like she was the mini me for Chad. So it just could be that she's so ingrained with him that she just cannot either she just doesn't want to lose him, even if she does suspect, that he could be guilty, or it's so ingrained. I'm not sure.
And they seem to kind of have an unhealthy bond, and I would hate to openly speculate about that. I have suspicions as to why she's so dedicated to her dad despite the fact.
What are
But
your suspicions? Or what do you think is possible? Not like you're making an accusation, but what are some of the
uh,
things that have run through your mind?
pedophilia is a big deal in the Mormon church.
Mm-hmm.
It is a huge deal. And without any sort of evidence in this particular situation, I would hate to say that's what's going on. But sometimes, especially if you've got the mind control element in there, you have what's called trauma bonding. So even if your dad is abusing you in some way, it can be misconstrued as my dad is touching me, my dad is loving me. Um, he's doing this because I'm so special to him. And so there's a twisting that although you might be being abused, that it's done under the premise of love and caring. So I would hate to say that that's exactly what's going on, because I have no proof of that. I'm just suspicious that there's a weird kind of bond, protective bond there with Chad.
Right. And well, besides Emma and this whole case, I am interested in that as well because the I've had a lot of people contacting me, and they're constantly telling me about, and a lot of women who leave the church were sexually abused by somebody. I've had two women contact me and tell me about literally a cop who's involved in this trial where they were raped, went to the police station to report it, and the cop told them, go home and quit trying to ruin people's lives. I
Mhm.
had one lady say she left Rexburg because of it, because she was raped there, and the detective refused to take a report, chastised her for trying to cause trouble for the man, and to go home. And literally, I mean, just outrageous. And then I've had just many people contact me and talk about being molested and this or that. So why is it accepted, if it is accepted in the Mormon church? Why don't they do anything about it? Is it part of the whole mind control thing, or what's going on there?
Well, you've got two elements, protective elements going on there. One, you've got the networking of the Mormon Church, and in Rexburg, Idaho, where I used to live and go to school, it's everywhere. It is the culture. You don't go anywhere without being influenced by the culture. But secondly, you've got the satanic element. The satanic network within the United States is upwards of 10% of the population.
Oh
You
no, you're kidding me.
know, and this is a conservative figure from an ex-Satanist, from,
Wow.
from a satanic family. When you have got police officers, judges, prosecutors, dentists, your children's teachers, your doctor, all of these areas have been infiltrated by Satan. And now we're seeing in society an open worship of Satan. It's pervasive. They're not even hiding it anymore.
I
So
know. They're
we have,
promoting it. They have all the celebrities promoting it. They show
yep.
them in bathtubs full of blood and
Mhm.
and just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting.
It is. And I've got a couple of older videos out that go into different signs that you need to look for when you're looking in marketing and advertising. They
Hmm.
tell you, you just have to know what you're looking at. I call it symbol literacy. You have to understand because your subconscious mind will take in more information through symbols than they do through words. And so you've got all of this through media. The media that's controlling the Daybell case is completely slanted, and they're not going to the bottom of the truth.
Oh, let's talk about that, because I've had a problem with that for 4 years. For
Mhm.
4 years, I've been watching as this, in my opinion, this entire story is 100% controlled by the Mormon Church. 100%.
It is. They have a lot of control because there's something else that I think is going on with Chad and Lori. And Lori has said this, it doesn't apply to me. It doesn't apply to me. You know, she said that
Uh
many
huh. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the Mormon church, you have what's called the second anointing. And the average LDS member will not know anything about this. However, they will understand this terminology. Quote, my calling and election made sure.
You're
And what
what? What
it's
did you
called,
say?
my calling or your calling and election made sure.
Okay.
Okay. So what that is it's code for the second anointing. And this is by invitation only, which is why the average Mormon member will not have any idea what I'm talking about right now. But
Okay.
what this is the prophets, the general authorities, different higher church echelon, stake presidents, oftentimes, not always, um, people in the 70s, Mormons will understand what that means. It's part of the church pyramid structure. So 70s would be down here somewhere. These people participate in a ritual within the temple where all their sins have been washed away. And so that means that you can navigate through this temporal world and not have to worry about your choices anymore because your place with God or in the celestial kingdom has been made sure. All your sins have been forgiven. So, really, it doesn't matter what you do at this point because temporal laws don't apply to you. You're living from a celestial place. And
Okay, and so
so
you think for sure, I mean, you wouldn't know for sure, but you believe that Lori has been through that the way she keeps saying, this does not apply to me, this does not apply to me. And
I
I
am,
agree because Eric Smith, who was Chad Daybell's close friend, said that there was something that he called the Davidic principle, and it was exactly what you're describing, was that man's laws don't apply to him. He said Chad completely 100% believed that. 100%. So he must have went through that as well.
yeah, so when that happens, they go stay the night in the temple. All the temples are set up, or at least the bigger temples are set up like a hotel. So people will come, they'll stay the night, they have the general authority, wash their feet, and then so both the husband and the wife, so it's an all night affair, the type of ritual, and there's not a lot of information out there on the second anointing. But that is one of the things that they stress is the rules of the world don't apply to you. So now you can do what's called lying for the Lord. A lot of general authorities and the prophet, they will kind of skew the truth or just flat out lie.
Well, look at that. Yeah, East Idaho News, quite frankly, I feel has, it's not that, I don't know if they're lying, but they're whitewashing everything and
Yeah.
just telling a story that doesn't include the whole basis of these crimes, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I think they're whitewashing what's going on. I think they've hidden several elements, like the second anointing, which is where Lori and Chad would get this idea they can just carte blanche do whatever they want without any sort of consequences, because they're working on the ideology that only celestial rules and laws apply to them, of which
Yeah.
they are celestial beings.
Yeah, and Lori was really talking about that telestial, terrestrial, celestial. She was really into that. So, yeah, we can assume both of them have been through that ritual.
I believe so. I'm not sure about the Melanies. I have a
Mhm.
particular visceral response to Gib. I just
Mhm.
punch her in the face.
Me too. Oh no, every time I see her I have a visceral response, and at the end of this reading called the Yellowstone reading, I see a lineup of people there for JJ's death. Okay. And then in a couple of the readings I'm talking about where he was killed was in this room with the bunk beds, and I say one is whiter than the other. They have navy blue comforters. So in one of those rooms, Lori's upstairs, 3 feet from where Melanie Gibb was sleeping. There's a room with a double bed and a single bed. So if they took the bunk bed down because it was 6 weeks later when the search happened,
Mhm.
that room does have a navy blue comforter. It has navy blue sheets on both beds, and I can guarantee to you they didn't drug him prior to his death. It was a JJ put up a real fight. I described a whole fight in this readings of JJ fighting for his life, and there's no possible way. If that happened right there, which it appears it did, if that happened right there, that means Melanie Gibb was 3 feet away
Right.
if she was sleeping, which I don't believe.
I don't buy that story at all. And one of the reasons why they have to create a trauma situation for the person they're torturing is because that adrenaline hormone is released into their blood. And so when they ingest the blood, whether they're eating, I don't want to be too gruesome here, but I think I understood that they were eating part of Tylee's thigh or something
Oh
like that.
yeah, that was an
Okay.
absolute blood ritual, Tylee. It was
Yeah.
all to eat her flesh. I saw them eat her flesh 4 months before, and I'm graphically describing what they did with
Yeah.
her body. It's all accurate. And they actually made sandwiches, and then they even wrapped up some in butcher paper, and they put it in the deep freezer to save it and eat it later. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for
Well,
sure.
when they torture her or JJ, and that adrenaline, that fear is being released into the blood, it produces something called adrenochrome. So when they ingest that, that gives them this euphoric high feeling, but it also is something that is supposed to be an anti-aging type of live
Anti-aging,
forever. Yes. So a
right?
lot
Okay,
of celebrities and politicians, a
right.
lot of the reason why they participate in these SRA rituals is to harvest the adrenochrome. So I would suspect that, when they were talking about make it hurt,
Right.
you know,
Oh,
amp up the
yeah. So
volume.
Chad wanted to make it hurt. You're right. He talked
Yes.
about making it hurt with them. So
Yep.
they wanted that adrenochrome, and who knows? Since they
Yep.
didn't, if any part of JJ was cut, I mean, they could have just cut one little thing to get a couple cups of that.
Yes. Yeah. So, and then that would be multi-purpose in terms of that type of ritual. So not only are they shedding their blood, sending Tylee and JJ off into the celestial realm to be free of all their sins and their demons, but now Chad or whoever's there in the ritual, they're drinking the adrenochrome and taking in the elements
Mm-hmm.
of that energy to harvest for themselves and
Right.
whatever demons they're carrying with them, because I guarantee they're possessed.
Oh yeah, no, I saw it. So I probably done 100 homicide cases before that. I had
Yeah.
never seen demonic activity. Like I have learned to notice that there's a certain energy around every murder. Like it's an identifiable energy, right, of murder that you would never know if you hadn't experienced it. But this was the first case where, like, when they were standing around the fire eating the sandwiches, um, I saw a demon go across the yard and go right into Lori.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And then,
Wow.
then I saw at court a demon go into Lori. And then I actually did a meditation. I wasn't trying to meditate about this case, and they started showing me all kinds of demon related stuff and how it interplayed. And so when I was done with the meditation, I was like, oh, that's weird. And I got up and looked up the satanic calendar, and it turned out each child was murdered. It's all one day off, that which makes me wonder if it's really like the Mormons version or the Freemasons version of the satanic calendar. But on the satanic calendar, the days the children were murdered were human sacrifice days. And you know how they even taped JJ's hands. See, it's supposed to cut it off, but what I was getting even 4 months before they found the bodies was that all the blood and guts from Tylee made him nauseated. So it wasn't that he bothered him to kill her. It was just not, and he refused to chop up JJ. Otherwise, that would have happened to JJ too. But it was Alex that he was like, I'm not doing that again. It grosses me out or whatever. And then the frosting on the cake, the proof where they can't say anything different. They get married on the day of revels, the day of revelry. Okay. So that's the day set aside to worship the demons, but with sexual gratification for the humans, they sacrifice to the demons that season. Literally. There's no denying that these are two satanic human sacrifices, and
Yeah.
that day of revelry, or some people call it day of revels, it just seals the deal. It seals the deal. There's no arguing about whether it was or whether it wasn't.
I do believe there's a window within the date. I've worked with somebody who is brilliant with numerology. He's a former mind control slave, and he's still under the payroll actually, of the CIA. And
Hmm.
he's a genius with numbers. And so he worked out the numerology on their death dates, their birth dates, and so forth, and has confirmed that he believes that this is a ritual. But each of those dates do have a window both sides. So November 8th would have an effectiveness window where the energy is still sustained, like on
Hmm.
the 6th, 7th, and 8th, or the 8th, 9th, and 10th, something like that. So it gives
Right.
a window
Right.
of wiggle room.
Right. Because even like I've done rituals, but they're all like good rituals. Like
Yeah.
I before this happened, I always thought the word light worker was corny and stupid. But then when this happened, I'm like, I'm a light worker. I am a light worker. Like, but I've done rituals too. And it's like, if you
Yeah.
can't get if the church, if it's the real date's on Thursday, but church is meeting on Wednesday, then let's do it on Wednesday. So it's within a couple days, or if you're going to do a full moon ritual, you could do it either, for 3 days before, 3 days after. You want to get as close as you can, but clearly that's what they did. And I've been trying to, for 4 years, that's one thing I've never solved is where did Chad pick up this calendar and start using it? Because it looks like she's asking him when do we do JJ? When do we do JJ? You know what I mean? She wants to do JJ, and Chad is saying not yet. So that tells me Chad likely has the calendar, but
Mhm.
maybe they all have it. I don't know. But why is she asking him when if she kind of already knows?
You know, you can find a satanic calendar online. So either he had it before because he's been brought up in it or he's been involved in it somehow, or he researched it and just printed it off. So either way, it's accessible to everybody.
Right. But is there any tie, like in the Freemasonry? I guess maybe you wouldn't even know, but you know when you get up to 33
Mhm.
degree, by then that usually does involve some human sacrifice, right? Or
Uh,
maybe not necessarily. I don't know for sure.
I don't know that that's always true. I think once you hit 32nd degree, from what I understand, then the doors of Lucifer are revealed to you. At the 32nd. So by the time you're 33 degrees in, you have all this information, you're locked in, you're not going anywhere. And Luciferianism is actually taught inside the temple. That
Hmm.
is part of the temple ritual, is the presence and the obedience to Lucifer, not to Christ. Christ isn't really a central figure in the
Okay,
temple.
I'd like to hear more about that. About what level do they start teaching that?
Right from the beginning.
Oh, so once you're ordained into the is that's not the word. What's the word when you're officially admitted into the temple?
You go through your endowment.
Okay, so you're endowed and you're given new spiritual names, right? So
You
so Nate Eaton on East Idaho News is over there making this big deal how they call themselves James and Elena, but that's part of Mormon tradition. That's what I'm trying to tell people, that they've been lying to everyone for 4 years about what's really occurring here. It's totally normal that they all have different names.
so let me explain how that works. Remember in the beginning of our I was telling you about the shield and the blessing of God with the consecrated oil.
Right.
At that time, you are given a new name. Okay.
Okay. When
So
you wear the poncho?
yes,
Yeah.
so it's at that same time, every woman who goes through the temple, whether you're in New Zealand, England, Utah, it doesn't matter. Every woman receives the same new name in the temple that day. So for instance, my new name that was given to me was Emma.
Okay.
My husband, who my ex-husband, who went through the temple 2 years prior to me, he was given a new name, and James, like Chad's name was James. That is one of the potential new names that you will get if you are a man going through the temple and getting your endowments out. Every man in the temple that day will either get James or Joseph or Hiram or whatever. So it's uniform. There's nothing inspiring about it. It's not because you are um, a special person, you're a number that day. And everybody's assigned the new name that day. So when you leave that room and you go into receiving your endowment, which when I went through is about a 3.5 hour ordeal,
Okay.
they have this whole presentation in the temple. It's a reconstruction of the Garden of Eden story. And so this is when they did the live shows. Now everything is on video, but this is when they would have an older man come in. He would play the character of Lucifer in the temple. He would wear a brown suit with either a white or a black shirt underneath. And so we would all follow Lucifer's instructions when it was time to put on our aprons or do certain things in the temple. Now, at the end of that session, and it was the first time I had gone through the temple to get my endowment done, I did it for myself. After that, I would be required to do it as a proxy for somebody who was dead. I would go on behalf of them.
Okay.
So when I went through the first time for me, the person I was going to marry, who was a male, who had already gone through, I was to give him my new name so that he could call me up out of the grave on the morning of the first resurrection. But I'm not allowed to know his. So Nate Eaton knows his wife's new name, very patriarchal. She's not allowed to know his. So Nate could have the new name of Hiram or Brigham or who knows what it would be. But when he's talking about how crazy it is that Lori and Chad have alternate names, he has one himself.
Yeah,
Guarantee you.
yeah, I've sensed that we're being bamboozled for the last 4 years.
Mhm.
Um, but now it's kind of just opened up a little bit for like with your information, with Eric's information, people writing me letters and
Yeah.
yeah.
The hard part about this story and what's going on with the Daybell case is there are so many possible influences here. It's not just coming from one area. So the fact that you have multiple threads to unravel makes it more convoluted and more difficult. And I've had a hard time with the prosecution, even though I think they're doing a fantastic job. They're not touching on the core issues. And I'm not sure if it's because they're trying to keep things simple or if it's because the Mormon church has infiltrated or threatened or controlled the case in some way, which I
Okay. So what if you found out Rob Wood was a bishop?
is he?
That's what I've heard. And,
Wow.
and the whole thing's Mormon controlled. Like, since
Mhm.
when do cops have a reporter go along when they're still just doing surveillance on someone? They don't have a reporter in their car, but yet they had Nate Eaton fly over to Hawaii with them to document the entire thing. They have controlled this story to a T.
Yes.
What I heard, and this is I haven't been able to prove like find documentation, but if someone could, if they know his name, they can put it in the comments. But one of the richest, most powerful Mormons is the one that funds the Mormon Church.
Oh, there are several. We're not talking the wrong
Something Doodle or something like that. Something.
doodle.
I don't know. Maybe his name has a phonetic doodle sound in the last name or something like. I forgot. Someone put it in my last. And I even think about, I would say a Mormon YouTuber that suddenly pops up out of nowhere, ends up on Netflix covering the case and is able to attend 15 weeks of trial. Well, I looked into going for a week, and it's all the hotels close to the courthouse are 200 and up a night. So to fly there, do a hotel, you're talking about 20 grand for each trial. Who's got that? Who's got that? Unless they're funded by somebody. And that person has whitewashed this story too. Every Mormon person is controlling this story and it's completely whitewashed. And I just feel tired of it. I feel sick and tired of the lies, you
Mhm.
know, sick and tired because it's a twisting of the doctrine. I can't imagine. And there's this outer ring of Mormons that are so nice of people that if you insult Mormons, those are the ones they put up right away to try to argue, oh, that doesn't exist. We don't worship Lucifer. We don't do anything in the temple, da, da, da. Well, because they don't. They don't
Mhm.
know, like you said, they don't. But could you tell me more about this Lucifer thing? So what are they taught? So as soon as you go through your endowment in the temple, you're taught about Lucifer?
Well, he's there from the very beginning of the endowment. So if you leave that little room from your anointing and
Uh-huh.
get your new name, you go into this big room. It's the first room. It's supposed to be the room of creation where God creates the world. So you've got men all seated on one side. You've got women seated on the other. Men and women are not to sit together, they're separated. You've got the aisle in between. You've got an altar at the
What do you
front.
mean you've got that idol in between?
Aisle.
Oh,
A
aisle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, and so in the creation room, what will happen is this is when they do a play. Now, they do it on video now and everything is audio, but back when I went through in 1990 before it was changed, it was a live show. So this man would come out and he played the role of Lucifer. And then you've got a couple of actors or characters who are playing Adam and Eve, and then you have the voice of God overhead on the PA system, and they're walking through the whole Garden of Eden scenario. So
Okay.
when Eve partakes of the apple, instead of um, it being an audio, like God is overhead, or Elohim in the overhead audio
Uh-huh.
presentation. You've got a real live presentation of Lucifer, who comes in and is talking about their nakedness. And now you need, when they hear the voice of God, he says, quick, hide, put on your robes. And so they have to, because every person in the audience going through the temple that day is supposed to be emulating either Adam or, and so you do what those characters do. When Lucifer tells you, hide your nakedness, that's when everybody in the audience takes out and they put on their symbolic Masonic apron.
Oh, everyone in the audience does it at the same time?
Everyone does it at the same time. You stand up and you put on your apron to hide your nakedness. So what's really happening is the audience is being groomed to listen and follow the directives of Lucifer right then and there at the beginning of the endowment.
And
So
nobody questions that?
nobody.
No. And up until then, are they wearing these ponchos? Oh, the whole
No,
room is.
maybe I should have been clear about that. After you leave the room, you go
Mhm.
back to the dressing room, and as part of that little room thingy, that's when you put on your garments, the Mormon underwear.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Because I
then,
was thinking, well,
yeah.
that could go south real fast for them.
I try to forget my time wearing the garments, yes, but that's when you put on those disgusting underwear underneath the robe in front of the
Okay.
woman. She helped me put on my underwear,
Okay.
and it was underneath the shield. And then at that point, they ushered me from that little room. I had to use my hands to keep the poncho closed,
Okay.
back into the dressing room. That's what I put when I would put on my temple garb,
Okay.
and then I would join everybody else in the creation room for the start of the endowment.
Okay. And
So
so then everyone in the creation room now has been through this
mhm,
thing in the poncho, and then they're now
yeah,
dressed in the new the white Mormon underwear thing, and then they're all sitting there and they're watching this Adam and Eve, but instead of Jesus coming, it's Lucifer, and
yes,
Lucifer is the authority they're being introduced to at that
yeah,
point.
yes. He's the.
That's pretty. That's a pretty big deal.
It is, and you
So, in
don't.
other words, would you say the Luciferian temple? I mean, the Mormon temple is Luciferian.
Absolutely. I've done several videos on the Luciferian presence and domination in the church, as
Okay.
well as broken down the symbolism on the outside of the churches and the temples, as well as inside. So I break down all of that symbolism, and what you see is a repeated theme of Lucifer and Satanism.
Oh, so the yeah. So tell me everything you know, which is I mean sure would go all day. But what can you tell us about this? Is Luciferianism and Satanism the same thing to you, or tell me what you know about these things?
You know what? I kind of struggle with that because I think I think they're in the same vein. I don't know that they're separate ideas.
Right. I
So,
know. So so I guess how they introduce the Satanism is through Lucifer because he's charismatic, the bringer of light, and so very high in wisdom. And so if they can connect people with that, then it's step by step to go into the actual satanic stuff like the blood sacrifices and that kind of thing.
well, and that's part of church doctrine, anyways. And it really doesn't matter what religion you're in. We've had a biblical history of sacrifice right from the beginning with Isaac and his son. I mean,
Yeah.
so we have a history of that, biblically speaking.
Right.
But the church doctrine, as far as the LDS church goes, Lucifer is recognized as a high son of Elohim, just like Christ was.
Okay, so
And,
he's Christ's brother. He's Jesus'
mhm,
brother.
yeah,
Lucifer is Jesus' brother.
mhm.
Okay. And then, okay, tell me about how they introduce now this Lucifer worship in the Mormon church.
I think members don't realize that that's actually what they're doing. It's not like they stand at the podium and say, "We're going to pray to Lucifer now." It's all done under the guise of Elohim. So, or Heavenly Father. And so outwardly, they say that they're recognizing Christ or worshiping Christ, but all their rituals will say otherwise. So it's really, you've got this conscious awareness of I'm worshiping Christ, but what's really happening is this subconscious programming and energy that is going towards Lucifer worship, which is really the bulk of the energy that the person has. Because we operate about 95% from the subconscious and only 5% from the conscious. So if you've got 5% going towards Christ and 95% going towards Lucifer, he wins.
Right. So is it how do they do that? Is it like in the songs they sing like oh Lucifer like the Pope was doing it. The Pope. But he started some big ceremony by singing this whole song, "Oh Lucifer, come to us." And I was just like, "What?" But is that what you're talking about when they're do they repeat things about Lucifer or how are they integrating Lucifer into this?
Well, one by doing the Freemasonic signs and symbols and rituals, which is based in masonry, based in druidic magic. So when you are holding your arm to the square, when you are making certain signs and symbols within the church,
Like this.
um, that's a Baphomet, isn't it?
George Washington is even the George Washington statue was what I was thinking of, but yeah, Baphomet does that too, right?
Yeah,
So
it's
so so does so does so does George Washington, but
yeah.
yeah,
He was a Freemason, and his allegiance was to Freemasonry, and then as the president of the
yeah,
United States. So it's very subtle. It's very subtle the way they do the worship. It's not an outward thing. So the example that I gave of Lucifer in the temple, that's a perfect example. When you are standing at the prayer altar in the temple, and I don't know if this is accurate today. It was accurate when I went through. But there was a time when we stood around the altar in the temple and we would have to raise our hands 3 times and lower them, saying it was something like Pele, Alel, something like that, which is um, a chant or a worshiping of Lucifer. So you would do that 3 times and repeat Pele, Alel, or something like that.
uh-huh,
I don't want people in the comments to go bonkers because I didn't get the exact words right. It's been years
right,
through the
yeah,
temple. But it's those types of things that the individual is doing. They don't know where it comes from. They're trusting that the leaders in the temple are holy, righteous men of God. So they're just doing
yeah. See, yeah, because their whole life they've been programmed to
it.
trust the leadership of the church, and so
Yes.
they're just follow, and then they get to. Do you think they like seek out the ones that seem to like when do they introduce the sacrifices and the animal sacrifices and things like that?
It just depends on if you're a bloodline family. A lot of Satanism is down through the generations. So if you're born into a bloodline family, that is likely just going to be your upbringing, the way, somebody else might be brought up in Protestantism.
Hmm.
Satanism will just be a part of your life. So you will be introduced to blood rituals from the time you're an infant. You will
Oh, so it'll
be
seem totally normal.
Yes, until you figure out that it's not. And that is
Hmm.
a journey. Those are the individuals that I work with, for the most part, are individuals who have been brought up in Satanism, hidden under the guise of the Mormon church. Now, if you happen to be an unlucky kid who is just in a typical Mormon family, and the bishop knows that the dad has a problem with pedophilia, now you can be brought in as somebody who is part of the ritual, and you can be sacrificed, whereas a bloodliner will be protected for the most part. They want you to live because you're going to be the one who carries on the rituals. But if you're brought in as a sacrificial victim and you're not of the bloodline, you can have your blood spilt permanently. So it just depends. There are a lot of varying estimates that
So
are.
so at some level, if someone's at a certain level in the Mormon church and maybe they have a kid that's out of control and the maybe someone at the leadership in the temple might say perhaps we do a sacrifice, help them to heaven, and then they do a sacrifice under the temple.
I don't think it would work like that. I think it would be more along the lines of blackmailing the dad. So the bishop would bring in the dad and say, I know you've been molesting your kid, touching her inappropriately, or him. And so, what would happen is the dad would now have to turn over the child to the bishop to be used at his will or the general authority or what have you. This is how the government operates as well. This is how a lot of their sex slaves have been chosen, is through the dad's pedophilia and pornography habits. So now, in order to keep from getting jailed or prosecuted, the father now turns over his child to the as property of the government to be used
Wow.
at their will. So it's that type of situation. In order for the parent to not have some sort of repercussion, they now
Hmm.
turn the child.
Okay, so the Mormon church also has people within the child services of part of the government that can write it off that we're taking this kid, but then the kid kind of just disappears.
Most people are unaware of that at least 800,000 children and young kids disappear from the US every year. The United
Wow.
States is responsible for human trafficking and using social services, child protective services, in order to supply them with children.
Wow. So, do you guys hear that? I know sometimes when I cover these high profile cases, I'm like, you guys don't realize that 4 out of 5 murders are never prosecuted, that there's thousands of missing children. You're saying like 800,000 a year.
Yeah.
So then they take that kid under the temple. They don't sacrifice the lineage children, the Machiavellian. Is that what they're called? Machiavellian?
Merovingian and
Oh,
sometimes,
Merovingian. It
yeah,
shows how much I know. The
I
Merovingian
know it's a
bloodline,
lot.
they don't sacrifice those ones. Those are protected. Those ones are the ones trained to do it, right?
For
They're
the most
trained from an
part.
early age to help with those sacrifices. And
Yes.
then they take these kids that they've now manipulated out of that Mormon family. They've take that kid and they do a human sacrifice right under the temple, correct? Is that what you're saying?
That is a general rule with the bloodline. That doesn't mean they won't sacrifice the bloodline or people, but as a general rule, they will. And a lot of these bloodline women, as young girls, will be used as breeders. So they will have
Wow.
satanic rituals where the guys and the women are involved too. These little old Mormon ladies, don't let them fool you, because many of them are attending these rituals as well. But they will impregnate these girls under a satanic ritual. And so the demon child that they carry has a particular energy with it. And then that baby will be harvested to now be used as a blood sacrifice. And that's part of the contribution that a young bloodline girl will give to the satanic network. She will produce bloodline children for their sacrifices. So they will sacrifice bloodline children. It just depends what their purpose and their calling is within the network. It gets very intricate.
I see. Because yeah, if they can have a bloodline girl be a breeder, it might even seem to have a higher power to have that bloodline baby's blood spilled as well. Correct?
You have a more powerful demon that comes into the bloodline baby than just
Right.
than just your average demon. That's their
Wow.
that's their belief, because the bloodliner holds a higher frequency. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess here you could get into Chad's light and dark, rating scale for individuals and entities. So in order to have a darker demon, you would want a bloodliner individual who could sustain that type of energy to be sacrificed.
Wow. So essentially, it sounds like the Mormon temples are satanic temples.
They are. I believe that 100%.
And when all this started, okay, like I had like several hundred Mormons in my like little sleuthing group or whatever. and they were super nice to me,
Hmm.
very, very nice, and to the point where I felt guilty saying anything. But I did say, look, okay, I love reading old occult books, and in every occult book I've ever seen, when you turn that pentagram upside down so that the one points down, that's man taking dominion over God. That's what you're saying, right? When you, and it's over all these temples, it's over the door. You walk right under it every time, man taking dominion over God, because the 2 points are supposed to be facing down, and that's man's search for God, man attempting to connect to spirit. But the Mormon temples flip it upside down, and I got very upset when I saw that. But they all tried to convince me that I didn't understand and didn't know what I was talking about, and you know,
So you do know what you're talking about. They don't, because that spirit that should be facing towards heaven is now down into the ground.
exactly. That's exactly. And then I pointed that out. Yeah, they all just kind of wanted to convince me that I was confused, and I'm like, oh, this is one thing, because I am a spiritualist, Reverend, and
Mhm.
aside from that, I have copies of books dating back to the 1500s,
Mhm.
occult books, and it's never changed. When you turn that pentagram upside down, you're worshiping Satan.
And you know what? If you look at law enforcement badges and a lot of the military insignia, their medals,
Uh
it's
huh.
the same thing. The spirit point is down and the horns are up.
Wow, I didn't even notice that.
Look at military and law enforcement badges. You oftentimes have the element of Israel, the Star of David, but then
Hmm.
you also have the five pointed star. So both are present. You'll have the five pointed star with the spirit element down.
Yeah. So, okay, so back to these blood sacrifices, right? So so Chad, if he was very high, so he was secretary to the bishop at his church. So we can assume he is way into the temple practices, right?
Sure. Hmm.
And just by the way he talks and everything. So in the church, if he's seen children being sacrificed, this is not a whole big stretch what occurred here.
No, it's just a continuation. And, I have to tell you that cutting up a body is very difficult.
Cutting
It's,
up a body?
yes, it's not easy to dismember a body. And so I don't, the fact that Alex was repulsed by that in some way, or maybe he just didn't want to do it. That doesn't surprise me because it's
He
not
was
in.
nauseated. In the reading they showed me, he was nauseated, and he refused. He said he wasn't going to do that with JJ because it made him sick to his stomach. Not that
Well,
he cared about the murder at all, but it just the blood and guts and pulling her organs out, because I saw them pull her organs out. Um,
wow.
um, it nauseated him.
That's an old practice, the disembowelment.
Pulling the organs out. So that is part of the. See, you guys,
Mhm.
I've been trying to tell people that.
Yeah. Oh, that's an old practice that goes clear back, to, gosh, early, when the Catholic Church was just being formed.
Yeah, the Catholic Church. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think I mean, and so this kind of Luciferian agenda hidden behind a church is not limited to the Mormons. You're just an expert in the Mormons, but I mean, there's some guy Maciel that went around giving lectures all over the place. Like I was watching all his lectures, and he was one of the 7 advisors to the Pope. That's how high he was either a bishop or a cardinal, and but he quit, and he was going around telling people you don't even get up to be a bishop unless you've done a human sacrifice. Like there's like how many 50 or something. Oh, he was going on and on. I don't know if they killed him or if they just deleted him from YouTube, but he was giving really good lectures about
Wow.
similar to you, but about the Catholic Church. So this is there's an undercurrent of evil that hides. And there's a lot of good people that go to church. Like I love the Bible. I love Jesus. I love God. I'm not anti God at all in the slightest bit. But I also like studying all religions, like finding the beauty. I just man search for God, but there's definitely a lot of secrecy at the Mormon Church.
There is, and they're one of the five pillars. And I'm going to see if I can remember what those are. I know it's the military, Mormon Church, Disney, Catholicism, and I'm missing one. I think it's Masonry that are the five pillars in terms of running this world, the United States, and then the MK Ultra mind control program. So the church puts out this facade that they are the one and only true church here upon the face of the earth. But really, anytime you have a big facade of Christianity or Mormonism or Catholicism or even Disney, which gives out supposedly this wholesome um, facade to the world, there's really evil at the core of
Oh
this.
yeah,
That
I
is what
agree.
can throw people off.
I totally agree about Disney. Totally agree about Disney. Oh my God. Oh my God. I think they purposely groom America by taking, say, Miley Cyrus, and she's just an example because they do it to every one of them. So they'll make them seem super wholesome. So parents will let their little daughters look up to this person and put posters on their wall. But then that girl turns 18 and they make her be like a total Satan worshiping whore,
Hmm.
you
Well,
know?
this is part of good girl programming. So they do this, and this is, I'm very suspicious with Melanie Gibb with this because you have the good girl gone bad type of scenario. And even though Melanie Gibb is still in the good girl phase, she gives that little girl voice. She's talking so naive and innocent. But this is the pattern that they use with the Disney characters, and I say characters because they're all acting. They did this with Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Miley Cyrus, Justin Timberlake. These are all Disney kids who've been through MK Ultra. You
Right.
have you have the good girl presentation when they're young, they're so sweet and innocent, and then they turn them into Babylonian whores.
That they do it on purpose. I know Disney does it on purpose to corrupt America. I know they do that. It's
And now you
sickening.
have the minds of these little girls who look at Hannah Montana and think she's so fun and they want to be like her. And so they set Miley down from the or across from being this innocent, wholesome Disney kid into this Babylonian whore, but it's done incrementally so parents aren't alarmed as their kids are maturing and going through puberty and experiencing their own type of sexuality. Now Miley's taking them over the top. So
That's exactly what Disney's programming is about. They do it with I mean they do it with every single one of them. If you've been a Disney kid, you're going to be a whore when you're 18 and they're going to put satanic ritual all over the place and then they're going to try to bring a whole nother generation of American kids into being just satanic whores, you know.
but look what happened to Britney Spears when she started to have bleed throughs or her mind was so fractured. What did she do? She totally lost it. She shaved her
She
head, which,
shaved her head. She
yes,
was
but
trying to find herself again. Like,
you,
no identity. I have no identity. I don't know who I am.
she's been caught on film many times switching altars. Um, you see that also with the binds, with the shaving of the head.
Oh, big time her. Yeah. So some of them, the mental stress of even in their subconscious must just put them over the edge.
It literally blows your paradigm. Your circuitry, your neurons can only take just so much. So when you have a circuitry overload, you literally, we get that saying from somewhere, right? It blew my mind
Right.
because our circuitry can't sustain that.
And I'll tell you, Melanie Pulowski, she's a real, she's programmed by somebody, whether it's all, because I was like, did Lori program her? But you know what? If she was part of the temple, the programming was probably there.
It's likely that that happened, but also don't forget they always went to Disney. So it's likely
Oh,
the girls had their dads as
oh
parents.
my God. Okay, I see what
And
you're saying.
yeah.
Their dad may have put them all in this programming.
Hmm.
And
And
that's why Lori's all off the wall. Stacy went crazy. Melanie Pulowski looks delusional.
yep. Well, see, when you've got the dad as the handler, the head of the household, then he can keep mom under control. She may or may not be complicit. It looks to me like Lori's mom has been through at least at the bare minimum sex kitten programming. I mean, she has it written all over her
Oh
face.
yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, she's clueless in a lot of ways, and she is complicit and ignorant of the facts. And then you've got Lori, Melanie Pulowski, and then the Stacy. who have been reared under the handling of their dad, who will then turn them over to other handlers to do with them and program them as they will. So his job would be to maintain that programming. If he's not their direct handler, he's maintaining their programming within the house and then making sure they get to their handlers or their handlers have access to them to do with them what they will.
Wow. I don't even know what to say. It's shocking, but it is the it seems like the linchpin. What you're talking about makes total sense of what occurred here. Because for 4 years, mainstream media just denies every part of this. And from my understanding, even regular channels or like radio stations, there's a documentary on YouTube somewhere, and it said anyone who tries to expose the Mormon church will actually buy that TV station or buy that radio station to fire that reporter to make an example to everybody else that if you try talking about the Mormon church, this is what we're going to do to you.
Oh, and they do. I had a website for 8 years that they tore down overnight. I had articles, videos. This is where people made appointments. You can communicate with me, that type of thing. And one day it was there, the next day it was completely taken over. So that there's that, but then they also control my YouTube channel. So that has been shadow banned. A lot of my information has been suppressed. It's not put out there. And so I haven't done any active videos in probably 5, 6 months just because they don't go anywhere.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the link. Like when we're done, I'll put the link in the comments and I'll put the link in the description box to your YouTube channel. Um, yeah, if you say something, a forbidden word on here, you get shadow banned.
Yes. Well, and see, there are other Mormon, ex-Mormons who put out information, but they're controlled, or at least they
Mm-hmm.
don't go to the bottom of the barrel. And I don't,
Right.
I don't have proof on who's controlling who, obviously. But if you're not willing to go to the bottom of the barrel and expose them in their entirety, then
Then other Mormons who are having troubles won't know why it's so important to leave. Like I looked at a couple channels seemed to be dedicated. You would think at first glance they're exposing Mormonism, but they're not. They're just like, if you've left the church, we'll help you adjust to regular life. And they
Mhm.
keep it real whitewashed, real
They do.
whitewashed. They never talk about the things that you're talking about ever. They don't really talk about what goes on there.
It's
And
not a
they've
fun
even
topic.
pretended to cover this case too.
Yes.
And I'm always just like, you guys are not. I've been yelling this, like, I feel like I'm yelling. You know how you're yelling in an empty room?
Yes.
They're not telling you the truth. They're not telling you the whole story. You
I
know?
feel like that. I feel like because I have information as far as the Mormon church goes on what's really going on, but nobody's listening.
Right.
Because people, it's hard to hear the other, and they can't believe it because it's so unbelievable. I mean, who wants to believe that your prophet is participating in satanic blood rituals and abusing infants and toddlers and and doing this type of activity? Nobody wants to believe that, but
And
it's
so,
nonetheless.
yeah, because if someone was towing the line, drinking the Kool-Aid, and then they had to think for a second that, gosh, at a certain level in the temple, I'm going to be invited down into this room and we're going to watch a human child be sacrificed. Um, it's almost like they would lose their mind, and then they would just want to be back in their programming because it's more comfortable.
And see, that's why you have to be brought up in it. You can't take average Joe Blow, who's 35, who's had no exposure, and throw him into that type of environment and ritual without some sort of grooming, because they would blow the lid or they would have to be sacrificed or something. You can't take that type of person and just expose them to that. That's why these individuals are brought up in it, because they carry on the traditions.
So really that whole childhood of follow the prophet, follow the prophet, follow that whole mind control, even on that level of never questioning your elders in the church is all preparing for the Luciferian temple worship.
Yes, which they don't know they're participating in.
Oh, so yeah, they're never told we're worshiping Lucifer. They're just doing Luciferian
Mhm.
rituals.
He's presented as the adversary
Mm-hmm.
inside the temple, but what they don't realize is that there's cognitive dissonance happening when he's presented as the adversary. But then what happens is you do what he tells you to do, which is to put on the apron and clothe yourself for the voice of God. So there's cognitive dissonance happening within the temple, what you see versus what you do.
Oh, and then your mind at some point you're just turning over. Okay, well the temple leaders know what they're doing, so I'm not going to question anything. I'm just going to do what they say.
Right. And when I went through, I was barely 19. And so in my mind, even though I was scared to death, and actually that evening I laid in bed and cried for 2 hours and shook because I didn't understand what just happened.
Uh
But
huh.
what you're rationalizing in your mind is my parents go to the temple. My parents have done this. The man I'm supposed to marry has done this. The prophet has done this. Why is it that I'm not okay with this, but everybody else is? So now you start this internal dialogue with yourself of what's wrong with me that I'm not okay with this, but everybody else is. And
Yeah. Yeah, and
that
so
was
you
the
quit
fight I
questioning. You've been taught your whole life not to question this. So okay, so this is seeming weird to me, but you know what? I'm gonna just let go of that and not question it, and just keep going along and going along and going along.
The man that I married for 10 years and I had gone through the temple with that day, it was actually his bed. I was lying in that night, just upset and shaking. And he told me, you'll get used to it. And that's
Oh,
you. And I did.
you got used to it?
I did for a long time. I got used to it. I was an active participant in the church and I did regular temple work for many years. There were certain elements that were always weird to me, but we're taught not to question.
Uh huh. Do you want to elaborate on any of that, or whatever you feel like talking about as related to all this? And
Well, when it's not unreasonable for me to believe that Lori was getting communication in the temple. I experienced similar things.
yeah,
When I was in the temple, because it's dedicated, the whole purpose of the temple is to commune with the other side,
right.
is to have communication in some way. You're doing this work in the temple for individuals who have already passed on. There
Mm-hmm.
was one time when I was at the temple and I was standing in line. I was waiting for my turn to approach the veil to give information, all the secret passwords and signs. And I was there with my ex mother-in-law, and she asked me about this afterwards. So she saw what I was doing. When I was standing there in line, I heard, and my left ear is my spiritual ear, so I tend to hear things going on in my left ear anyway. But I was standing waiting for my turn, and I heard talking in my left ear. And I turned and I was like, well, who's there? I thought maybe it was one of the little old ladies, the temple workers, helping me to get ready to go to the veil to get my secret signs and passwords. Nobody was there. And so what was happening is the dead person I was going through the temple with, was practicing what we were supposed to say when we get to the veil, because I was acting as proxy for that person.
Oh,
So I've
I
experienced those things in the temple. It's not a far stretch for me to believe that Chad and Lori were actually communing with people on the other side of the veil, because that's the purpose of the temple. It's been dedicated for that.
okay. So yeah, as long as everyone knows that, and
Mhm.
like I obviously communicate with spirits frequently, and so it's good to know though, because in the news that's covered it in 4 years, they've never even disclosed that much, that the purpose of the temple is to communicate with the other side.
They're not going to tell you that because they'll tell you the purpose is to get your endowments done in order to be able to proceed into the next life with all of the blessings that Jesus Christ has laid out for us. But
Mm-hmm.
really, what you're doing is you only go to the temple one time for yourself. In your
Mm-hmm.
whole life, you only do it for yourself.
Oh.
What you do each time you go to the temple after that, you were going for in and behalf of so and so who is dead.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the rituals after the one time for yourself is for somebody on the other side. So
Oh,
that's
okay. Okay,
look.
so the root, yeah, so the rituals are purposely, and I just can't get over the betrayal by Nate Eaton, how he's led everyone to believe all these activities of Lori and Chad are so shocking when many of them are based on temple practices.
They are.
And he knows that. I mean, before he sent his daughter off to New York or LA, he took her and had her endowed in the temple first. And then there's a picture of her there with the the white clothes or whatever. And then he sends her off to Satan
Mhm.
land, really, in my opinion.
That's what it is. But he's going to defend it because he's taken an oath to defend it.
And that it's okay to lie. Because I started wondering the other day, I'm like, hearing people lying during this case, and I'm like, okay, I thought if they're Mormons, they're Christians, and one of the 10 Commandments is do not lie. But here I hear all these people lying. I've heard a couple of people lying on the stand, even. And I'm just like, hey, what's up with this? Are you a liar? Or, are you a liar or not? So I think, so as long as it's about the Mormon church, I'm sure they're given free reign. Like you should lie if you're protecting the church.
Yes, lying to the Lord is okay.
Lying for the Lord. Lying for the Lord.
Called lying for the Lord. That
Yeah.
part is okay.
I've
If you
seen
were,
a lot of that going on with the coverage of this case by
yeah,
by like I said, everyone covering it.
yep.
um, Everyone covering it has been lying to you guys for 4 years. Just so you know, you've been lied to.
And I
Um,
do want to reiterate the fact that the stuff I said about Lori with the MK Ultra programming,
mhm.
those are my suspicions.
Right.
I
Yeah,
I
yeah, you're
want
not claiming to have knowledge of that. You're claiming that you recognize that based on your
yes.
experiences of being part of the rituals of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And what you've seen people act, and you see Lori act similar, and you're wondering if that
Mm-hmm.
could be, or you're suspicious about that.
I am because I've worked, although I have not been through MK Ultra programming, I have not been a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. I've worked for years with individuals who have been, who have tried to make their way out of the government programming as well as Disney programming and their affiliation within the Mormon church, which is a cult. So, based on my knowledge and experience with all of these understandings, it's my very strong suspicion that Lori, at least Lori, has been through MK programming.
Right. Okay, so before we wrap up, we're at 1 hour and 45 minutes. So before we wrap up, is there any other things that we haven't covered that you kind of can link to the case from the Mormon, or do you think we've kind of covered it?
I think we've covered a lot. This isn't easy information to digest, and this might be new for a lot of individuals. They may have suspicions that we're not getting the full picture, but MK Ultra might be a new piece for them to have to chew on for a little bit. So,
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, cuz for me I've heard of it before. So
yeah,
to me it's just clicking all the things that I've been suspecting. You're just kind of piecing them together for me. Could you say the name of your YouTube channel again?
it's Galactic Storyteller. Now, my
Go.
website has been torn down, but you can reach my YouTube channel at Galactic Storyteller. And my Gmail is galacticstoryteller@gmail.com if you want to get a hold of me.
Okay. I don't know what I did to the comments. Just a minute. I wanted to write that in the comment. Galactic. Now, where did you say? Oh, say your email again.
Galactic Storyteller at gmail.com.
Okay, Galactic, and I'll put a link to Galactic Storyteller. Um, do you know I at one time At one time, I was an activist, and I really did come in contact with what people would call the kind of deep state, but not that deep. But, you know, just there's a layer of people that you would never know. If you're an American, you'd think someone was crazy talking about it. But it was medical marijuana, and I was trying to get the law. I mean, the law actually was changed, but the federal government was overriding it and manipulating it and doing what they wanted anyways. And so I took it on, and because I was on chemotherapy, right?
Oh,
And I didn't even have the idea. The doctor wanted me to try it because they had me on all these medicines that like could kill me, like pain pills and Valium, and just from the side effects of the chemotherapy. Well, so then I took it on, and I found that there's people below undercover agents. I call them the gray people. I mean, in our society, there are people that make things happen. But anyway, so I would put up this website almost weekly. I had to back it up all the time, but they would just hack it within 2 or 3 days, and it'd be down again. If they don't want you, the free speech, what I learned during that time was free speech. Well, one is not free. And two, they only let you have free speech if nobody's listening.
exactly. And because I've had a smaller channel, they think, well, nobody's listening, so we'll just let it go until it started exposing certain satanic elements. But one thing I do want to say about pot is one of the reasons why the government tried to regulate marijuana is because it is magnificent for breaking down the altar barrier. So those barriers that they created, or those compartments that they've created inside the individual's mind through trauma to compartmentalize information, marijuana will break down those barriers. So now you get access to the different personalities, and they start communicating, and you can put your mind back together.
Yeah, put your whole mind. And it also, I think it gives a little, like if you take a puff before meditation, I think it does kind of enhance a little spiritual awareness.
It does. It's weird because I don't know how that works. Maybe somebody in the comments knows with the cannabinoids and all of that stuff. But for some reason, it facilitates almost an opening up into the etheric realm.
I think so too. I think so too. I think so too. Wow. Wow. What a talk. I'm just going to walk around stunned all day trying to digest this. I want to thank you so much, Madeline, for having the courage to speak out on your channel and on mine. And it really ties up all the loose ends for me on this case. And I just really appreciate you being here today and taking your time to do this.
Well, I am grateful to be here, and I'm super grateful for my friend who sent me your link, because now I know you are on the board.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. And I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank all of you for watching, and hopefully we've been able to shed some light on, that missing link. Because I've even seen on court TV, Vinnie Politan, he keeps sitting there going, he'll have these other people covering the case, and he's listening to them, and he always looks confused, and he likes, but there's something else going on here. There's something else. There's something else. Is this only about sex and money? And they're like, all the Mormon people covering the case are like, yeah, it's about sex and money, literally lying. But I see him confused all the time. He's trying to figure it out. And what we've talked about today, this is the missing story right here. This is the missing link. This is the missing information. So even if you're just tuning in now, go back and watch it from the beginning. Please share it out there. And I really, really appreciate you guys all here today. Okay. All right. Thank you, Madeline.
Thanks.
Bye.